This is like my net. Hello, hello
Hi.
everyone. Hello everyone. Welcome to Agritech Founders Diary, powered by Agritech Digest. I'm your host Kenneth Obayuana. In today's running a successful trial, a new model working in one region, or a technology proving effective with a small group of farmers, but the real change comes after that. How do you move from a successful pilot to a scalable platform that works across markets, thousands of farmers, and real commercial conditions? So, in today's conversations, we will explore that journey. Our guest is Mr. Gbenga Aladejebi. Mr. Gbenga, welcome to the studio. He is the Chief Executive
Thank you
Officer
very
of
much.
Africa Afri Rice Nigeria, founder of Nigeria Rice Revolution, and the CEO of Planric Agri Venture. Right. So, Mr. Gbenga, we are excited to have you in the studio with us today. Mr. Gbenga, you will bring deep experience across agriculture, food production, investment strategy, and agricultural ecosystem development. His work has focused on strengthening Nigeria's rice value chain and advancing the broader goal of national food security sufficiency. We are happy to have him join us in the studio today. But before we begin, a quick note: this episode is supported by the Agritech Investors Group, a private and invite-only community where Agritech founders and investors exchange practical, insights on market access, adoption, and scaling agricultural innovation across Africa. If you are building or investing in Agritech and want deeper conversation like this, you are welcome to join the Agritech Investors Group. Without further ado, if you are building on agritech solutions and wondering how to move beyond pilots into sustainable scaling, this episode is for you. Let's begin. Once again, Mr. Gbenga, welcome to the studio, and we are excited to have you join us today.
Thank you, Mr. Kenneth. I'm happy to be here.
All right, not to waste time at all. Mr. Gbenga, you spent many years working across agriculture, from value chains development to advocacy through the Nigeria Rice Revolution. What first drew you into agriculture and the mission to strengthen Nigeria rice sector?
Oh, well. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me and
Yes.
also to commend Agritech Founders Diary for the fantastic work, you are doing to, lend your own quota to the development of agro space,
Thank
within
you
the
very much.
African, within sub-Saharan Africa, I believe, and
Yeah.
globally at large. All right. It's agriculture is one area I'm passionate about, especially when we talk of, in Nigeria and the West African sub-region and in Africa as a whole. Well, my interest in agriculture dates back to, interestingly, I have two major mentors. Okay, these are people who sharpened my interest in agriculture at a very young age. First of all, is my dad. Okay, I'm happy to say it. He had a farm. Growing up as a boy, he had a farm. Nothing on a large scale though, but
Yes.
we used to go to the farm, and so that was my first farming experience.
Great.
And the second person that drew my attention to agriculture, all right, is former President Olusegun Aremu Mafi Obasanjo, former president of Nigeria, who in 1976, all right, launched the Operation Feed the Nation. It will shock you that was, in fact, it's 50 years this year. 50 years ago, he launched that initiative, and we are yet to get it right. Okay, and you can imagine the pain some of us have when we talk of revolution in the agri space. You see, so and interestingly, he's still at it, and that's the beauty of it. OBJ, as we call him, is still at it, and that again lets us know something. In every space, in every sector, we have people we call visionaries. and we have merchandisers. You see, these are the major mindsets that shape, initiative, that shape development in any space. Visionaries and merchandisers. You
True.
see, so when you see visionaries who are at work, then you can be sure that there's hope. But
Yes.
incidentally, in many, in fact, in Nigeria as we are right now, in most of the space, we have more merchandisers than visionaries, and that is why we are where we are today. You see, so for example, in the rice value chain we're talking about, your question says, so what brought my interest in rice? When I heard of the humongous dollar that Nigeria was spending to import rice, in fact, I said, this cannot continue. You see, it's a separate thing when you are importing something you cannot produce. But it is now a calamity when you are importing something that you have every reason to produce in self-sufficient dimensions. You see, and that's why I said 50 years down the line, Operation Feed the Nation is not yet a reality.
Amazing, amazing. So, I mean, this intro has already given me that, yes, we are in for a great conversation. All right. But now, let's take it a bit further. Through your work with the Nigeria Rice Revolution, you have advocated for Nigeria to become self-sufficient in rice production. From your perspective, what structure changes are still needed to change that goal, to reach that goal?
Thank you for that question. I will still continue from the tangent I was on. You see, it's always good for us to tell ourselves the truth. All right. When you know the truth, even if you're not yet there, at least you know what to work on. But when you begin to deceive yourself, lie to yourself, you will never get there. Somebody rightly said that, you can't continue doing the same thing and you expect a different result. So if so far there's not yet acceptable results in our agricultural value chain and even in the rice value chain in Nigeria, something has to change. We can't continue doing what we used to do. So talking of structural changes that we need to make. All right. Again, let me also borrow the rhetoric of another visionary in agriculture, former president of African World Bank, African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, who continues to maintain that even as we are right now, Africa has the potential to feed the world. I hope you've heard him say that. So these are visionaries. So what is the disconnect? Okay, so right now in the structural changes we need to put in place in the Nigeria's rice space. First of all, we're talking of self-sufficiency. Having enough rice to feed ourselves, not even to talk of exporting. Okay, our productive capacity keeps going up and down, and down.
Yes.
Okay, because the local industry is too open, it's not protected. You see, so and there's no way if you don't take some hard measures, it will just be deceiving ourselves. Okay, you cannot open up your local productive capacity in the rice area to different external incursions, external interferences. Do you know? So, for example, why I think it was there was a government that came in. I think this regime, or they met the ban on rice importation. Okay.
Yes.
Those are one of the steps you take to protect your local productive capacity so that it can grow. Say, okay, because we keep having cheap and alternatives from the Asian bloc, flooding our markets with rice, we will never grow our internal production. So a comment came in and said, Nigerians were hungry, and they said, okay, we'll do a 3-month waiver on rice importation. That 3-month waiver has become 2 years. All right, allowing foreign brands becoming a market and a dumping ground for Indian and Pakistani manufacturers. Thailand, we have become their market. So you cannot have that and expect your rice industry to thrive. You see, I mean, we hear, look at other countries. If you want some level of development, they say there's no gain without pain. When Singapore wanted to break free, we saw what Lee Kuan Yew did in Singapore. They closed their borders and said, guys, let's work together. If you don't have rice, eat yam. Do you understand? So, but these are the kind of things we're talking about. See, because otherwise we can continue like this for another 50 years. And the prophecy of Operation Feed the Nation will just be
will not happen. But let me ask, what role do you think technology needs to play in the value chains of rice? In the value chain of rice, what role do you think technology can play? So if I was to say I'm a startup watching this podcast, right? And I'm thinking of how can I use technology to advance or support or solve any problem in the value chains. So what kind of problems do you think technology can solve that a startup who will be watching this podcast can consider or innovate with or play with? Yeah.
Yes. Again, bringing because we have a particular situation in Nigeria, which we must always factor in. Okay, right now, when we talk of startups, technological innovations, we need to come to our level.
Good.
The reality on ground is that because when we talk of these innovations, for it to become a business that will last, you are looking at mass adoption. Okay, the more people that come on board your service or your tool, the better for you. Okay, so we shouldn't look at the high-end technological innovations when we're talking of our agro space.
Yes.
Look at the low to medium technological operations. That's where we need solutions. The farming, the cultivation, the harvesting, the storage. Before you begin to talk of those high-end innovations that even the average farmer cannot even understand the interface of your app, because of the educational level. We don't have good educational penetration in this part of the world. So otherwise, you will just create your pilots, and only you will be using it. You get so that's what people should. That's the reality on ground. So you can't just sit in your office. Of course, we have great innovators in Africa, young minds who have creativity at their best. But you are not the one that will use the products. And until you have mass adoption, your startup can die and a premature death if it doesn't scale to a particular level. So that is what I would say in that regard.
Oh, great. So, but okay, moving on from there. In agritech or agricultural innovations, many initiatives begin with pilot program. In your experience, what makes a pilot truly successful beyond just a short-term result?
Yes, very, very important. Of course, again, all the pilots, the innovations that try to scale, of course, they are all looking at a long-term scalability, mass adoption and impact. That's, nobody starts a pilot and doesn't expect it to blossom, but then a few things they need to also have at the back of their minds or in front of their minds, actually. When you start these things, of course, high adoption rate, okay, and user buy-in. You want it to appeal to the users, because you are looking at solving a problem. Okay, so one of the things they need to have in mind, especially when I'm talking of the African market, the Nigerian space, is look at services, solutions that will be have mass adoption. Okay, people can understand it, they can relate with it. The more people can use it, Okay, so that's one. Then two is the scalability and the technical viability of your idea. Okay, because once you begin to have a success at the pilot level, okay, then you need to know that you want to scale, to a large dimension. So the challenge, don't just be carried away with the initial success. All right, begin to have in mind that your technical capability must be able to understand and integrate the challenge in the outer space. Because most of these pilots, they are created under controlled circumstances, under controlled environment. You can plot your graph, very, very smooth, but then, so understandably so. But of course, you have to know that once you begin to, scale, then your technical infrastructure must be able to carry what you are going to meet out there. You see, that's one. Then two or three, the things you would call actionable insights, which you acquire even as you have your small successful pilot. You have actionable insights, which data that you can begin to work on to give you an idea. Even as you start to scale, these insights begin to come in. So you must be able to interpret them, okay, and extrapolate so that you can utilize it for the next level of scaling, because even scaling is at different levels. Do you see? So, and finally, your team must be full of visionaries. Again, this is coming up. If you have more of merchandisers in your team, then you're going to run into problems. Because be sure that by the time you begin to scale, you have challenges, opposition, you're going to have competition. So if your team is full of merchandisers, then they will see the lion in the street and run back, okay, and begin to look for other things to do if the challenge is becoming too much. So these are the things that is look. So that also takes me into the common mistakes that successful pilots make, when they, after having a successful pilot. There are common mistakes that people make, and because we've seen a lot of fantastic initiatives that don't that end up not being scaled to mass adoption. So what happened? So a few mistakes come up, and this I will just mention a few. All right. For example, the fact that you have a successful pilot does not automatically translate that your pilot is production ready. You see, it's not. Don't just assume that because you have a successful pilot, you're surely going to have a successful mass scaling and mass production or mass adoption. Okay, so that is one. So it will help you to understand that the dynamics will change, and then you must be ready. In fact, there are a few schools of thought that have said that even when you begin to work on pilots, right from the onset, look beyond a pilot. Even we know it's challenging, but then that is what some have advocated. For example, because we know that when you are trying to have a pilot for an innovation, except you have all the money, you have to source the funds. So you can't start sourcing the funds at a large scale. You want to do something small first, then you begin to scale. But that is very critical to know that because you have a successful pilot, it doesn't automatically translate into ready production. And secondly, because that also would affect your re-engineering, because of course, like I said, if every pilot like controls environment. Okay, but by the time you begin to scale, you will need to have it in mind.
Hello?
These are some of the mistakes, pilot into scale. That, the platform is predicated on a user spending 3, 6 or 10 hours on the platform. And by the time you scale, you have people using or spending 2 minutes, 60 seconds on the platform, and it begins to mess up your data and projection. So you have to be ready for what we call messy data. The data is not together, unlike what you had when you were in a controlled environment. Then again, another mistake that innovators make after a successful pilot, because not once, what this thing we call a successful pilot. All right. Of course, everybody's excited. We've met our metrics. We've, done well. Then in that excitement, for example, they also begin to scale overheads. That's not the time to begin to add, overheads, begin to add more staff, and then you run into trouble as a startup. Thank God for the the AI technology that can help you to at least reduce your overheads, and tasks can still be accomplished without much expenses. Then, of course, again, still in the same manner, the excitement, the optimism that you share in your team does not necessarily translate to what you will experience outside when you begin to scale. In fact, you should be ready for skepticism and opposition, you see. So these are the things that, the mistakes that pilots make, that make them, at the end of the day, they can't succeed at scaling. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that elaborate explanations you've answers you've given to us today. But moving forward, let's quickly move forward. What factors determine whether a successful pilot can evolve into a sustainable platform that work across multiple regions and farmers' communities?
Very well. Yes. So the answer to this also is closely tied to what I just enumerated. The moment, a successful pilot begins, they avoid and understand these easy mistakes. Okay. Understand your culture, the mindset of your market. Okay. Understand the mindset of your market, understand the needs, and begin to scale based on this, avoiding these mistakes that I just enumerated. It is almost, well, let me say, guaranteed that your pilot would receive mass adoption. Okay, as of course, it's under the assumption that from the beginning you had done your due diligence. And again, like I said, don't forget, in the Nigerian space, even the West Africa, the African space, don't just borrow high-end innovations that work in the US, that work even in China, and expect it to work here. You must adapt it to the present and the prevailing realities of our space. That's also very key.
Okay, sorry, let me ask you. I think you've mentioned that like twice now. How do we begin to adopt our own local technology? No, we don't want to copy the US, we don't want to copy the China. How do we begin to adopt our own local technology? What do we do to adopt our local technology? I mean, because you've been talking about, let's not bring what the US or the China is doing to our own space. How do we begin to adopt our own local technology, and what are those local technologies do you think we should look forward to adopt? I don't know if you get the question.
Yes, I get your question. I get your question.
Okay, okay.
Well, incidentally, when we talk of the the potential in Africa, okay, for agriculture, all right, technology is usually not the first or the second factor for success, okay. I'm talking of things that are inherent, okay, because most technologies are borrowed, are imported, most of it. Just recently that from Africa we begin to see, original technology that doesn't have foreign input. So even though we are borrowing the technology, what we are saying is adapt it to our situation, the peculiarity of our situation. Okay, so for example, like I explained in the agric space on the rice value chain. Okay, I mean, right now, for example, in the advanced countries, they have technologies to measure metrics of a grain of rice, to understand how to improve it, how to interpret the things to impute into the seed. Those narratives are not that we understand them, but we have gone ahead of our time. It's like we're just seeing what they're doing and we're trying to leap. Whereas even to successfully cultivate and get the maximum harvest from an acre or from a hectare of farm rice land, we have not yet mastered it, because the technology is still very crude. It's not refined. It's last century technology we're still using. So we need to put all these things together and know exactly where the shoe pinches, and not just look at what others are doing and we are racing ahead of our time. That's my position on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me ask you, as we begin to close, looking ahead, what role do you think, or what role do you believe agritech innovation will play in helping Nigeria achieve food security and agricultural transformation?
Well, yes, there's always a responsibility and a place for agritech. We can't say we do not need them, because when we talk of agritech innovations, like I said, it is the entire value chain. Okay, so we should stop looking at maybe the payment platforms. Those are the end. And I think where farmers have an alert on their phone to go and pick fertilizer. Those are financial fix. You see, so agritech has a role to play. Okay, let me give you an example. Somebody rightly observed, and I perfectly agree. This farmer to market platforms. Beautiful idea. The person now said, okay, a farmer comes on a platform, gets a buyer, okay, for stuff, cutting off middlemen. Now the challenge is to transport the crops to the buyer, because the road infrastructure does not exist. You see, so you can see that's an innovation that has completely oblivious of the reality on ground. That's the kind of things we're talking about. We shouldn't just throw in innovations, even in our agri space in Nigeria, for example, without partnering with the real crux of the matter. For example, good road, good rail network is necessary for that innovation to work. Otherwise, after a while, the farmer will stop looking for buyers outside his immediate environment, because he cannot transport the item to the buyer because of bad infrastructure. Okay, so this is the reality. And then, because once you begin to solve those actual problems, of course, this whole thing, the government, everybody has a role to play in the successful adoption of agritech innovations. The government has their place, private sector has their place, investors have their place, and even the farmer groups. So we have to put all these things together and begin to address the real matter for the benefit of not just us, even the generation that is coming after us. Thank you for
Okay, thank you very much for Mr. Gbenga. Thank you very much for sharing your insight and experience with us. Your perspective are like an important lessons for the agritech ecosystem. Success is not just about launching new ideas, but about building systems that can scale sustainability. I appreciate you for your time, and I hope
You're
to
welcome.
have you again.
Always a pleasure. I'm just a phone call away.
Thank you very much, and
Thank you.
have a lovely day.
You too. Bye-bye.